Greetings and felicitations, dear audience. Today I'm going to go into deep dive into scene and structure. This topic is a foundation of writing craft. We're not talking about anything to do with story. We're not talking about plot, characters, theme, setting, or even viewpoint. We're talking about how one sentence leads to another. Cause and effect. Roll that intro. Salutations and admirations, dear audience. Let's discuss Scene and Structure by Jack M. Bickham. I bought this book in 1994, and I hate this book. This book made me not want to be a writer. I'll explain why specifically later, but let's get into this information. This is a lot. This is a big video, so let's get started. Quick disclaimer, are you a writer? Do you want to know things? Please continue. Are you a reader? Do you want to know how disgusting sausage and underground sewage of writing books works? No, please leave. Abandon this video. If you want to see sausage and sewers and you won't be able to ever read a story the same way again, please continue, but don't blame me. I warned you. Every story that you've ever read is essentially a series of cause and effect statements. It sounds dumb, but every sentence is a follow for the previous or perhaps several sentences before. An action happens, an effect from that action happens. It's deeper than that though. A motivation of the first actor happens, an action happens, a response from the receiver of that action happens, and then a motivation happens because of that action received, and then the cycle continues. Let's show this on a screen. Yes, there's going to be a test at the end, but first let me show you what I mean. Mark wants to play ball. He throws the ball at Johnny. Johnny catches the ball. He wants to play ball with Mark. Internal stimulus, external action, external reaction, eternal effect from the original stimulus. What's going to confuse readers, though, if you don't make that logical and sequence together. Mark wants to play ball. He throws the ball at Johnny. Johnny screams, "Lisa, you are tearing me apart." Johnny says, "Oh, hi, Mark." Amazing acting. While humorous, you can see that really doesn't make any sense and things don't fit together. If your readers read your story and they can't follow it or they don't understand what is happening, this may be why. It may not be your setting, it may not be your characters, it may not even be your plot. Just how your characters interact with each other and with the environment may be illogical. Yes, we're doing a bit of memes today because this topic is very dry. So the motivations that happen are internal. They're internal emotions and thoughts because of that action. Your actions are external actions, and each stimulus has to have a response, and each response follows that stimulus. Seems very basic. However, if your response is not logical, then there must be an internalized logical reason for that. Tyrion Lannister gets made a fool. He internalizes revenge, but later he outwardly forgives Arthas to plot his revenge for later. Each sequence of actions should be in order. If multiple actions happen to a character in a battle, then each should be completed in the order of the action happening. Punch 1 happens, punch 2 happens, kick 3 happens. Then block 1 responds to punch 1, body blow responds to punch 2, sonic boom responds to kick 3. This leads to sequences in order. It's easier to follow and keeps the reader clear. For scenes, not chapter, but scenes, structure is very similar. All scenes require a goal, and the goal must be internally said in some sort of internal dialogue, or must be spoken out loud. There needs to be a conflict that stops or hinders the character, and the failure to reach that goal needs to create a disaster. Thus, goal, conflict, disaster. So let's break each of those down. Your hero's goal must be defined in greater or lesser part, a grand speech or a simple internalized thought. It needs to be concrete and something they can actually do. Not vague, not philosophical. The goal should be working towards the great story arc, quest, or whatever your book is basically founded upon. We have one question, which is what your main character is working toward. That's the story question, your book question, the whole arc of your novel. Each scene has a goal which your character is also working toward. If they achieve the goal too quickly or easily, then your tension is removed, reader interest is lost. So the goal needs to be difficult, it has to be important, it can't be completed very quickly. And if it doesn't happen, then there has to be negative and direct and immediate problems, consequences because of that failure, that disaster to keep tension. A goal that is important can make the scene pointless or not believable. So a small goal of getting a candy bar at a store when life is normal makes the scene a bit too mundane. However, a goal of getting a candy bar to stop the evil overlord from destroying the entire universe also seems a bit contrived. Too big, too small, who cares? It needs to be essentially, like the old story says, just right. A goal needs to have a time frame that is also reasonable and makes sense for your story, that also raises tension. If the candy bar needs to be bought in 2 microseconds, then the universe dies. It's not believable. Nobody can really do that, so who cares? If the candy bar needs to be bought 2 months from now, then why did you even tell me about it? And I'll care in 1 month and 28 days later from now. The goal needs to not be able to be re-rolled, repeated, a term from tabletop meaning you can't just try again. So you essentially ask, well, how about now? Well, how about now? I roll again. How about now? Do I make it? Do I make it? How about now? Can I roll again? Can I do it? Can I do it? No means no. If the goal can't ever happen and therefore your character is stuck though, then the story ends and your character can't continue. So no candy bar means the universe explodes. Well, your story's done. But if your candy bar means that the evil overlord buys all the candy bars just to be a jerk and make the hero mad, then that means something. It just got personal. A well-thought, well-made story about a candy bar that ends with a galactic battle of universe-ending consequences can sometimes make your story go off the rails like a crazy train. So don't let the goal be necessarily all or your story ends, because a lot of times your readers will understand that that's not going to happen, and so it doesn't bring a lot of tension. Your overarching plot goal, that's the one where it's essentially do or die, but your scene goal needs to be able to be achieved, and if they don't achieve it, it's a disaster, but your story, your novel, your book doesn't end. Conflict is the reason why the character can't get the goal, why they won't get the goal, why the goal may destroy your hero once and for all. The conflict needs to be real, it should cause suffering, stress, anxiety, or at least some negative emotion. Psychological conflict needs to be represented by a physical representation of the conflict. So if a character is sweating over it and it's really stressful, then you need to portray that not just with internal dialogue, but also with physical manifestations of that. A goal of, say, climbing a mountain is blocked by a wall of ice. The climber feels despair. The conflict is internally the despair, but the conflict outwardly is the very slippery ice wall. The climber tries again, but gets a certain height and falls down. They twist an ankle. They despair more. Then perhaps they try again with renewed confidence after they get a pep talk from their climbing coach. A conflict needs to be intense enough to be a conflict, but not overshadow everything in the story, because this is just a scene conflict. If the store clerk won't give our hero a new phone because their credit is terrible and their credit card doesn't work, then that's pretty bad. If it's the middle of a galactic war and they have to get that phone or everybody dies, it might be a little too mundane. Again, too much, too little, you have to find just right here. Don't also, though, avoid the conflict. If the store clerk solves the conflict in 2 sentences, then you just flinched away from the conflict. You didn't really want to write a hot conflict, so the store clerk needs some sort of motivation for the conflict. Maybe the hero was a jerk to them in high school, and so now the store clerk is getting their revenge. Or the hero will say, maybe they just shrug and leave. So now you've essentially removed the conflict, the tension for the story, and your reader doesn't want to read anymore. So your hero needs to be active and engage in the conflict, and you need to have a scene after scene of this, so that way tension rises and the tension of the plot continues, so the reader reads all the way through the book. And then here's the important part: once you have that conflict and the conflict is resolved, then a disaster in full, in part, or in some evil way needs to strike. The disaster is how you keep the character from obtaining their goal, stopping your story because they just achieved everything. You're setting up the next scene and keeping the tension going so the reader keeps reading. The disaster causes your character to be in a worse situation than before. A disaster is the answer to that goal. The goal is essentially the action. The disaster is the response. No, you can't have it. The ice wall, say on your climber, falls down and buries them alive. Suddenly you have a whole new story. Or if they do obtain their goal, then at what evil cost? They climb up to the next ice wall, which causes an avalanche, which blocks their ascent to the next level of the climb, but also buries their friend alive. Which are they going to choose? A wrong disaster, though, can run the story off again like a crazy dragon train. If it's a wrong disaster like waking an ice dragon in a contemporary story of just climbing a mountain, then the character stops, the story stops, and the reader goes, does this make sense? And that's the most important thing. Is it logical? Does it make sense? Have you foreshadowed what you're doing? Fundamentally, this is about either planning a story or knowing how to work through a problem in your scene, so that way you know how to build that goal, conflict, disaster, which is one of the fundamental differences of being an outliner or discovery writer. I am a methodological outliner to an extent, so I have to plan my stories where I go Ozzy Osbourne with Thomas the Tank Engine. So did you plan this scene or did you work through the problem of the scene? That's what's important. A plan for each scene is going to be represented by a nice graphic here in a second. It's not a nice graphic, but at least we're going to show you what it is. Number 1, each scene goal should relate to the story goal. Number 2, goal should create conflict. Number 3, conflict needs to be against the character and external, even if the emotions behind it for your protagonist and antagonist are internal. Each scene should have one viewpoint character. My personal opinion is each chapter should just be one viewpoint character. Number 5, each disaster moves the story forward by moving the character backward. Number 6, the disasters are not book or character ending, but the reader enjoys reading about people, beings, overcoming obstacles. Number 7, the next scenes should respond to the goal, conflict, disaster of the previous scenes, whether the one right before it or several down before it. This establishes connection and logical throughput for your story. For revising and planning scenes, number 1, scene goals should be stated in internal monologue or out loud. Number 2, scene goals should be important to the viewpoint character. Number 3, the opposition, other than the first couple scenes, should have some foreshadowing about why. The hero was a jerk in high school, made fun of the store clerk, or the climber saw a weather report about the ice warnings and ignored it. The conflict shouldn't just be pushover and should actually show flaws in your hero. The store clerk says, "I've been planning this since high school," to your hero, or maybe your hero ignored the warnings of their mother, so that way they didn't actually notice that it was an ice storm that just happened last night. Know the reason for the goal and the opposition for it, so that way the opposition and the wanting of the goal makes sense. Number 6, don't go for the first immediate disaster, which could be very cliche. Sometimes the second one may be as well. However, familiarity is good, but also bizarreness also can be good. So find a good path for you in moderation of both. Number 7, a disaster may lead the hero away from the goal even further if you give them what they want, but evil, terrible strings attached to that goal and they get it. 8, conflicts can't be just boring. Thus, try something new if you have a bunch of scenes. Maybe the antagonist just straight up ignores the hero, or have the conflict be about the hero isn't even paying attention to what's happening with the antagonist, and that's part of their flaw. So the hero is going to listen and actually figure it out maybe later in the book sometime. Number 9, the opposition is irrational for an irrational character. If they are kind of crazy, then that's fine, but make it make sense with that character and foreshadow that some point in the book previously. Number 10, as an underwriter, there's something that I can definitely tell you. Try to write more than just the bare bones. I would suggest even overwriting, because it's a lot easier to cut out things than to put a bunch more into it without causing structural deficiencies in your story. When I underwrite, like I have a bunch this week and last week, I know I'll have to essentially rewrite whole chapters, whole scenes, because each connective tissue of that scene or that chapter needs to make sense for the whole throughput of what's happening, and that's why cutting out is easier generally than trying to push more stuff in. Number 11, raise the stakes in believable ways. The old adage of, the best way to raise tension is to put somebody with a gun in there who's going to kill the hero. That's fine, but eventually you can overdo it. Number 12, characters should be able to relax and feel comfortable, but only out of ignorance, because there are worse things coming for them. Maybe the character doesn't know, but the reader does know, and so the reader has a lot of dread. Are you clear on scenes? Of course you are. I hope you are. You learn how to go from sentence to sentence, action, response. Same thing with a scene, goal, conflict, disaster, action, response. But now, how do you connect each scene together? First, we're going to do a quick aside.